has already been, and that which is to be has already been, and God seeks what has been driven away. This is the word of God for the people of God. All right. So, for everything, there is a season. This is a line that we recognize, right? It's made familiar to many of us through that song, Turn, Turn, Turn. There is a season. The Byrds, the Limelighters, Dolly Parton, all kinds of people have sang this song. And it resonates with us because it feels true to our human experience. But if we're honest, how often do we stop to consider what it actually means, right? Ecclesiastes tells us that life unfolds in appointed seasons, not because every moment is good or even desirable, but because every moment falls within the ordering of God's world. And so Koheleth or Ecclesiastes is confronting our illusion of control. Life is not random, right? We're not that, but we're also not in control over it. And so the question that we ask today, when something good or something painful or bad enters your life, what do you believe is behind it? So again, think of those moments in your life where something really good happened. Is it all you? Or if something really, really bad happens, do you think, I cannot believe this happened. This is just the way it is, or whatnot? What is really behind what you believe happens? This is a question that we wrestle with a lot more than we might admit. It surfaces in the quiet hours of the night when we think about our future or our regrets, or maybe what's going to happen at work, or our retirement. Are we going to be okay? It meets us in the hospital rooms in moments of uncertainty, when we watch loved ones struggle through illnesses or pain or even death, or when we're in the hospital room and we don't know what's happening with a diagnosis. It's in the chaos of the world that we experience today. Turn on the news and you think this whole place is blowing up, like we're not going to make it. It even follows us into our successes. When we finally achieve that thing we thought would satisfy us or bring us some completion, we only discover that something is still missing deep down in our mind and heart. So the other question would be, why does life stir up deep anxiety within us, right? Good or bad? And it's because time is real and we're not in control of it. We are creatures bound by time, yet our hearts are too big to be contained by time. We remember the past, we anticipate the future, but we ache for something beyond what this present moment offers. And this longing is not an accident. As we said in last week's sermon, God created us for eternity, specifically for eternity in a relationship with Him and participating in that created order. But because of the fall, our design as eternal beings now exists in a temporary world, in a temporary body. And that creates tension, kind of a spiritual dissonance between what we were made for, what we deeply long for, but also what we currently experience while we live in this fallen world. And it's that longing is what Ecclesiastes 3 is speaking about. Now, people try to explain away the anxiety that they have in this life by various philosophies. Some live by fate, right? It's what Nietzsche calls amor fati, it's love of fate. Some impersonal force that can crush or lift without care. How many of y'all know Doris Day? Que sera, sera, right? Whatever will be, right? Some look to astrology. That's something that's gaining popularity again. I cannot understand why, but the movement of the stars will influence what you do, who you are, and all that good stuff. Maybe it's just blind chance, random happenings that happen in life, and you try to, in your mind, interpret them into some kind of story of meaning. But Ecclesiastes rejects all of those options. And it says there is an order to a life, but that order belongs to God, not fate, not the stars, not randomness, nor blind chance. It says that there is a mystery, but it's God's mystery. It might feel like a blind maze, but God is in charge of the seasons of our lives in the continuation of history. Ecclesiastes says meaning is not something that we manufacture from scratch, but it's something we receive as a gift as we learn to fear God and trust His timing. And so this is the backdrop for those famous words that we just read in our text today. Ecclesiastes 3 opens with that headline of human experience. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. So Kohelet says that human life is not lived on demand, but it's lived in the seasons we receive by God. And our deep anxiety comes from wanting to be in different seasons than the one God has actually placed us in. As if we could bend time and the circumstances around our will and say, no, I want it to be like this, or it needs to be like that. We simply don't have that option as we live this life. So right from the start, Ecclesiastes confronts both our fear that life is chaotic or our fantasy that we're in charge. Life is ordered. It is not random. But again, that order belongs to God. We're not in control of it. There is a time for everything, but that time is God's schedule, not our schedule. And so from that headline, the preacher then walks us through the series of paired opposites that have become so famous. In verse 2 and 3, we read, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to uproot, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to tear down, and a time to build. So the preacher starts with the most basic realities of our existence, birth and death, and names the disruptions and restorations that mark our life: planting, uprooting, wounding, mending, collapsing, rebuilding. This is just life, right? They're not abstract ideas on a page. There are beginnings, there are endings, and recoveries. These are the very things we worry about at night, that keep us awake too long. Ecclesiastes is teaching us that God is at work in both what we gladly welcome and celebrate, but also what we would never choose to happen. And both of those events belong within his ordered world, even when we don't understand why things are happening or his reasons behind it. In verses 4 and 5, the focus moves closer to our inner life and our relationships, where he says a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain. And here the preacher is reminding us that even our emotions and our connections with other people are seasonal. Ecclesiastes does not ask us to deny that sorrow happens or pretend that we're fine when things aren't. It acknowledges that there really is a time to weep in this life. There is a time to mourn. But it also insists that our hearts are not meant to be frozen in that place forever. Just as our longing for eternity creates tension in our temporary world, our grief and our joy each have their appointed time within God's order. The last lines in verse 6 and 7 press into the realm of our human striving and decision making. A time to search, a time to give up, a time to keep, a time to throw away, a time to tear, a time to mend, a time to be silent, or a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war, or a time for peace. Life in a fallen world is full of tension, contradiction, and hard choices. And this poem doesn't smooth any of that out. It doesn't sentimentalize it either. Ecclesiastes is saying that wisdom, Christian wisdom, is not the power to control or manipulate our times, but it's the humility to discern what it means to be faithful in the time that God has given you right now. Not every moment calls for the same response. Sometimes obedience means holding on, and sometimes it means letting something go. Sometimes obedience in a situation is speaking out, and sometimes it's keeping silent. Meaning is not something that we manufacture by manipulating or conquering time, but it's something that we receive as we, again, learn to fear God and trust his timing in these seasons and respond faithfully in them. Now, after this poem is over, we return to that familiar question that you're probably already absolutely bored with in the book of Ecclesiastes. What gain has the worker from all of his work or toil? I've seen the business that God has given to the children of men to be busy with. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity in the hearts of men, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from beginning to end. So those are cool verses, right? And you think there's something right there. I don't know what it means, but it's right. And so what I'm going to try to go with is two people I referenced a couple sermons ago, because these two authors have helped me at least grasp what Ecclesiastes might be saying here. That's Augustine and C.S. Lewis. And each of these contribute to, I think, a good understanding of time and history and how we as Christians are to faithfully live in response to these ordained seasons, which oftentimes brings us heartache and anxiety. Augustine put words to this ache a long time ago. He said this prayer, "O God, you have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you." Now, what that means is that our deepest problem is not simply that life is too short or that seasons change, but our deepest problem is that we were made for a relationship with God, and we keep trying to settle for less than God, right? We think that this season that's good in our life is going to satisfy us, and it will not do so, right? Ecclesiastes calls this eternity in our hearts. Augustine calls it that restlessness, but it's all talking about the same thing. It means we won't find ultimate purpose and fulfillment in this life. It has to be directed toward God. We're not merely time-bound animals reacting to the circumstances, but we are image bearers of God with eternity in our hearts. And so Augustine helps us see that our restlessness is not a flaw. It's God's design. It's a symptom of our separation from Him. I really want you to understand that. If you're going through this life and you're upset and you're sad, it's probably not because you're just a depressed human being. It's because you weren't made for this world. You were made for something deeper. And until you can get that relationship with God right, everything is going to feel slightly disappointing, right? We are made for God, and we will be restless until we rest in Him. Every season will feel incomplete, either the bad or the good. And C.S. Lewis then helps us define this ache in a different way, but it's the similar ache, and he calls it joy, but not the way that most of us use the word today, joy. Lewis didn't mean that pleasant feeling or a successful season which you're proud of. What he defined this as the sharp, piercing longing that is awakened by something beautiful but not yet fully possessed. So he described joy as an unsatisfied desire, which itself is more desirable than any other satisfaction. All right, I know that sounds like a hard thing, a paradox or whatnot, but it's exactly what many of us experience when we're caught up in worship or in a sudden beauty or in a moment of deep love. You're captivated, but you know that this is still just a shadow of what will come when we're fully in communion with God and one another in heaven. And I try to think, but I get this way sometimes listening to music. There will be moments in time when I'm listening to a hymn or any other song in which I'm lost in the moment and I am transported to what might be the gates of heaven. And maybe it's mystical in some way, shape, or form. But all of you have had these moments. It might be when you said I do when you were getting married, or it might be when you held your baby for the first time. It might be when you see someone you love deeply achieve something great, and there's this moment where you're like, this is it. But guess what happens? The next day happens, and you're left with that emptiness. You were close, you felt it, you knew it's right, but then it's gone. And it's that longing then that says it's because we're not made for this place. There is something greater coming. Even the most intense joy on this earth will end. For everything there is a season, turn, right? For C.S. Lewis, that experience was not a sign, again, that we were defective or that we just can't be happy, just accept it. It was a sign that we were made for more than this world. He says if we find ourselves a desire that no experience in this world can satisfy, the most likely explanation is that we were made for another world. And that's so true. He often spoke as if human desire were a kind of homesickness or a longing for a country we had not yet reached, but somehow remember. So joy for Lewis was not the destination, but it was a scent, almost a smell of that country. It was a signpost pointing us toward our true home. So think about this for a minute. When you feel that aching, that happy, sad longing, that feeling that even your best moments are not enough, Lewis would not tell you to numb it, drink some more, find an escape, or treat it as a failure, but he would tell you to pay attention to it because it is not a sign that life is meaningless, but it's a sign that life is more than this world could ever give us. Ecclesiastes says that God has put eternity in the human heart, and people can't fully trace God's work from beginning to end. That's kind of the frustrating part. But Lewis says that frustration is a clue. Augustine says that our hearts will remain restless until it rests in God. Again, Lewis would say the heart is homesick until it anchors its way to home. All these things are pointing to the same reality, that we cannot be at home in this world. And I'll get into that in a second. That is why we can't find final satisfaction in any season of our life, whether it's the seasons of earth or whether it's those seasons that we go through, good or bad. It's not that every season is good or bad, but it's simply that every season is too small for us. The joy we taste in this life is real, but it's never the whole story. It's a sign that we were made for something greater, and that greater is the reality of God himself. That the life we were made for will not end here in 6 feet under the grave. And that is why Ecclesiastes doesn't urge us to escapism in this life, like many people do. But it urges us to receive our time, our seasons as a gift, to do good, to fear God, because whatever God does will endure forever. So Augustine and Lewis aren't contradicting Ecclesiastes, but they're unpacking that ache that he describes. Augustine tells us why we can't find rest in the world. Lewis tells us why we can't stop longing for something better even in good times. And together they help us to see that the burden of eternity is not a curse, but it's a call to look beyond the seasons and to find our rest and our home in God. So when life feels beyond our control, we don't need to pretend that we're strong enough to hold it all together. That's the other thing. You're not. The God who appoints every season has also come near to us in Jesus Christ. He has entered the sorrow of our seasons. He's borne our sin, and he's risen again to make all things new. We haven't experienced it yet, but he's the down payment, and we know it's going to happen. Your tears are never wasted on this earth. Your waiting for that is not an empty thing. Your life is not random, but your life is in the hands of a good God who's been displayed on a cross and resurrected in Jesus Christ. And it's also very important that this life, as great as it might be for you right now, is not good enough for us. That's a fear that I have for Christians, is that, yes, we become anxiety-ridden, frightened, even depressed on occasion because of the struggles and injustices that we experience in this world. But another bigger fear I have for Christians in this world is that we think this is as good as it gets, and we lose passion for the pursuit of God or what heaven will really be like once we get there. I pray that no one here in these pews will settle and say, this is good, because this ain't nothing compared to what God has in store for people in heaven. So today, if you're hearing the voice of God in this text, your season may be painful right now, but it's not pointless, and it's not the end of the road. Your longing is not an accident, but it's a summons to come closer to God in Jesus Christ. The call is to come and to trust in the one who stands outside of time, who is never late, never confused, never absent. And I pray that you would let the Lord Jesus Christ become your hope, become your home, become your peace, become your place of rest. So today, if you need to surrender your life to Christ, now's the day. If you need to return to God in Jesus Christ, today's the day. If you need prayer for whatever season you are in life, today is the day. I invite you up here to do so. The same gospel that saves our soul is the same gospel that sustains our seasons and our everyday. And I invite you then, today, if need be, respond to that as we get ready for our hymn of invitation, which is Lose a bulletin all the time. What is it? 384. Please stand.